Will the Disaster Recovery International Affairs and Planning Committee meeting come to order? The time is March 11th, or 1:35, March 11th, 2026. If everyone can please silence their cell phones, that will help our cause. My name is Tamara Paulton, and I will be your chair for today's meeting. Members, in accordance with the Sunshine Law, if you are not in the council chamber, please identify by name who, if anyone, is in the room, vehicle, or workspace with you today. Minors do not need to be identified. Also, please see the last page of the agenda for information on meeting connectivity. With us, we also have Committee Vice Chair Nohelani Hodgins. Aloha Winala.
Aloha, Chair. I'm at my private residence. The only adult I can name is my husband, Koa Hodgins, is also here, but I do have a couple minors that I won't name. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Voting Committee Member Kawanoe Batangan. Aloha Awinala.
Aloha Winala Kako.
And Member Cook was going to be joining us from the South Maui office. Oh, there he is. Aloha Winala.
Aloha Winala. All, I made it. Glad to join you. Thank you.
Thank you. And we also have Council Member Gabe Johnson. Aloha Winala.
Aloha, Chair, council members, community members. There's no testifiers at the Lanai District Office, and I'm here and ready to work. Thank you.
Thank you. And we also have Council Chair Alex Lee. Aloha Winala.
Aloha, Chair, and Kahe from the Crow Indian Nation. I'm here in my workspace alone, ready to go. Thank you.
Thank you. And we also have Member Shane Sinensi. Aloha Winala and Kahe.
Aloha Winala, Yauko Pakahiapao, here at my private residence. And I'm here with one unnamed minor canine. And there are no testifiers in Hanachi.
Thank you. And we also have Council Member Kiani Rollins Fernandez. Aloha Winala.
Aloha Awinala, Chair. Aloha Awinala Kako. I'm at my private residence alone here right now. I'll likely be joined by my two children who are minors in about an hour, as well as my husband, McKenna Fernandez, who's not a minor. There are currently no testifiers at the multi-district office. Mahalo, Chair.
Thank you. I've heard that Member Sugimura is driving to her residence up country, so we'll probably see her a little bit later. This meeting of the Disaster Recovery International Affairs and Planning Committee of the Maui County Council is located on the traditional Aina of Kanaka Wai'iwi, who never ceded their sovereignty to the United States. We recognize that Her Majesty Queen Liliuokalani yielded the Hawaiian Kingdom to the U.S. in duress under threat of violence to avoid the bloodshed of her people. We further recognize that Hawaii remains an illegally occupied nation state by the U.S. as documented by a 2021 scholarly article for the National Lawyers Guild Review by Andrew Reed, adjunct professor of law at the University of Denver Sturm College of Law. Generations of Kanaka Maoli and their knowledge systems have sustainably cared for Hawaii and continue to do so. We are grateful to occupy this space and learn the ways in which we can contribute. As a committee, we seek to support the varied strategies that Indigenous people of Hawaii are using to protect their land and their communities and commit to dedicating time and resources to working in solidarity. From the Department of Planning, we have Administrative Planning Officer Greg Fost. From the Department of Fire and Public Safety, we have Fire Prevention Bureau Captain. From Corporation Counsel, we have Deputy Corp Counsel Michael Hopper. We did invite NEMA, but they were unable to attend today's meeting. From the State Department of Transportation, we have Deputy Director of Transportation for Airports, Kurt Otaguro, and Maui District Airport Manager, Marvin Moniz. Members, without objection, I will designate individuals mentioned as resource persons under Rule 18A of the Rules of the Council. The property is owned by the State Department of Transportation with Deputy Director Otaguro overseeing all airports in Hawaii and Mr. Moniz managing airports in the Maui District. No objection? Okay. We also have DRIP committee staff with us this afternoon. We have Committee Secretary Criselda Paranada, Legislative Attorney Carla Nakata, Legislative Analyst Keone Hurdle, and Jarrett Pasquale, Assistant Clerk Jean Pokipala, and Ambassador of Aloha Ryan Martins. We have two items on today's agenda: DRIP 23, Bill 47, amending the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance on off-street parking requirements for housing, and DRIP 5, Bill 21, CD1, conditional zoning for emergency airstrip operations at Kapalua Airport. We can take testimony up front, and then after opening remarks and presentations. If there are no objections, I would like to take DRIP 5 relating to Bill 21 CD1 2023 first, followed by DRIP 23 to accommodate State DOT, who has another meeting to attend this afternoon.
No objections.
Okay. So on the airport, this was a request from the West Maui Taxpayers Association back in 2021-ish. And so we scheduled this item because at the end of last term, we got it all the way to second reading, and then it was recommitted a little bit because of the way the unilateral was written. The council referred a proposed bill to amend Kapalua Airport's conditional zoning to the Maui Planning Commission in November 22 via Reso 22-213 CD1. And prior to that, we held a online town hall because we were still in COVID times, and that was held on November 16th, 2021. And we talked about defining emergency use, emergency air transport, medical supplies, evacuation, and who would pay. We had originally been told that the FAA would pay, but that's not the case. The Maui Planning Commission recommended approval of the proposed bill in February 2023. The 2023-2025 DRIP Committee recommended passage of the proposed bill, now Bill 21-2023, on first reading. The DRIP Committee last discussed the Bill 21 on August 7, 2024, after State DOT proposed revisions to clarify that they are not responsible for providing funding for the installation of runway lights. Although the committee recommended this revision and passage of the bill on first reading, several updates occurred. It was found that the property is 57.296 acres rather than 50 acres. It was also found that only 3 TMKs comprise Kapalua Airport rather than 4. In April 2025, State DOT provided a draft revised unilateral agreement with a new paragraph on emergency lighting installation requirement, which required the county to assume various obligations and costs and a duty to defend the state for claims on the lighting system's design. This was determined not to be appropriate in a unilateral agreement, nor were they discussed at the last DRIP meeting. The requirements were more appropriate under an intergovernmental agreement. In response, State DOT provided a revised draft unilateral agreement on February 27, 2026, under Granicus number 18, with amendments specifically to paragraph 5 with the heading emergency lighting installation. Concerns arose about the proposed $10 million runway lighting system at Kapalua Airport, with emphasis on fiscal priorities amid community recovery. Kapalua Airport has never required nighttime use, even during emergencies like the Lahaina fire evacuations. County funds should prioritize urgent community rebuilding over costly airport upgrades with uncertain necessity, and this stance reflects a pragmatic approach to budgeting amid shrinking federal support and competing social services needs. Congressional delegation discussions indicating federal funding for Hawaii's social services is shifting towards defense spending, decreasing support, and this financial reality underpins concerns about committing local funds to airport infrastructure. That being said, we did meet within the last couple weeks with manager Marvin Marniz, and he had found solar FAA-approved lighting that he estimated to be about $120,000 as opposed to 8.4 or 10 million. I'm not sure if the updated unilateral agreement language is acceptable to Corp Counsel. So at this time, I'd like to receive any opening comments from the state DOT and Corp Counsel, and if planning had any. So Mr. Otaguro or Mr. Moniz, did you have any opening comments? You can either sit up here at this desk or stand at the podium, whichever you feel more comfortable with.
Right there. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Council members. Kurt Otaguro, Deputy Director for Airports. With me is Marvin Moniz, our Maui District Manager. First and foremost, we just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I know it's been a long time coming to find the right balance between safety, fiscal responsibility, as well as practical sense for our community in Kapalua. And so we've been considering different alternatives, as you mentioned, and so we believe we have a suitable alternative since this would be for emergencies only, and we can explain what that solution would be. That would be much more fiscally palatable, I believe, for this purpose at this point.
Thank you. Mr. Moniz, did you have any opening comments? Just press the button. Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon, Chair and council members. We also want to thank you guys for making time today in your busy schedules. And we're very excited for this project. And I think hats off to you, Chair, that we looked at this after the Lahaina wildfires and also the time during the COVID period. So again, we just want to say thank you for being here today. And yes, we're open for any type of suggestions or ideas as well. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I did want to recognize Member Sugimura has joined us online, Kahe and Kahi, and Aloha Winala.
Aloha Winala. I'm in Kula in my office by myself. Nice to see Marvin Moniz here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hopper, did you have any opening comments? Would we be able to accept the revised unilateral agreement?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to sort of back up and remind everybody what this involves. This was a zoning condition amendment. Originally, the zoning for the property, which designated the property as airport zoned, had several conditions on it that's common with any sort of zoning change that you may have. Those are conditions as authorized by the county code to mitigate the impacts of the change in zoning. That's what the conditions do. And conditions are set forth in a unilateral agreement, so a document that is signed by the property owner, and that's it. It's approved by Corporation Council as to meeting the requirements of the county code. But the landowner signs that agreement, and that's recorded on the property to require the landowner to comply with the conditions. The conditions were, there was a proposal to amend the current conditions, and as you have probably already seen, the original conditions stated that the airstrip operations are limited to 1/2 hour after sunrise to 6:30 p.m. unless, and then the amendment stated, unless extended for emergency airstrip operations, and then defined emergency airstrip operations. So initially, the airport was not allowed to operate past 6:30 p.m. the conditions were amended to allow, not require, but to allow the airport in the condition of zoning to operate past 6:30 p.m. in certain situations. The condition, however, it's a condition of zoning. So the zoning granted the change to airport with the condition you can't go past 6:30 p.m. And then that condition was amended to allow you to go past, or allow the owner to go past 6:30 p.m. in certain circumstances. It does not require any lights to be installed. It does not require any emergency operations. It's a county zoning condition that previously limited the operations and now allows the landowner to do certain operations past that time. But again, creates no obligation of the landowner to do so. Unilateral agreement's essentially a form document that a landowner signs to basically state it will follow all of the conditions, and then that's recorded on the property. A unilateral agreement, as authorized by the code, could not create obligations on behalf of the county to do anything. And I'd be concerned with talking about any type of intergovernmental agreement under this agenda item, because this deals solely with the zoning condition change. So I think the decision before the committee and for the state is, is this an appropriate change to the condition? If the state can't execute the unilateral agreement, which again simply says it will abide by the conditions, which are in this case less restrictive as amended than they would have been before they were amended, then the conditions would remain and state that operations are limited to 6:30 p.m. and couldn't go beyond 6:30 p.m. as far as the conditions of zoning are concerned. And that's certainly an option for the council to not extend that. That's the option, I think, before the committee and eventually the council is, should there be an amendment to the condition to allow operation beyond 6:30 p.m. in certain cases, or should that condition remain? And again, changing the condition, which is currently limits the operations to 6:30 to allow operations after that for emergency purposes, doesn't create an obligation on anybody. If there is not funding available for that, if that's not feasible, that's not a breach of the condition. The condition doesn't say you shall operate emergency for emergency purposes. It allows that to happen. So, I wanted to just note that the forum for, and separately, I'm not sure of what mechanism there would be for the county to participate in funding state infrastructure improvements. That's sort of a separate issue, but again, that's, I think, the scope of the agenda item. I think the council and the council members have been through zoning conditions and the zoning process before and are familiar with that process, but I wanted to sort of state that for background as to what this ordinance amendment was and what the unilateral agreement is for those. So if you have questions, I can answer that, but I think this is probably a recap for many of you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hopper. I totally neglected the historical. Another part of the piece of the historical puzzle is Kapalua Airport was, I believe, built by like Hawaiian Airlines as a private airport initially. And so it in the changing conditions, the main ones, I believe, is like no military, no helicopters, no night flights. Then when Hawaiian Airlines started being less profitable, I think the state picked it up. And I actually used to work at Kapalua Airport for Island Air. And I guess what I would say is, in my time living and working in West Maui, despite the conditions, I've seen like Black Hawks land at Kapalua Airport. It wasn't a state declared emergency. I think it was just an emergency for them. I've seen helicopters land and take off there after August 8th. I haven't seen night flights, but when I brought this up at the last community meeting, one of the original pilots who did like the first crash simulation thought that she could land a flight there at night with truck headlights. But I won't speak to that. But just because the conditions of zoning doesn't allow those things like helicopters, military night flights, it's not like an FAA airport, and that's why they wouldn't pay for the upgrades, because it doesn't comply with all the FAA types of things that they do. It started off as a private airport, and then I believe the state acquired the airport. And as we know, the conditions of zoning run with the land regardless of who the owner is. So I think that's a comprehensive update and historical check. Mr. Post, did you want to add anything to the opening comments?
No, I don't have anything to add, Chair. I would mention, though, that Deputy Director Anna Lillis is also online virtually in case we need to reach her.
Oh, great. Thank you. Welcome, Deputy Anna Lillis. So I think that's it for opening comments. We will now move on to public testimony for DRIP 5. Written testimony is encouraged and can be submitted via the e-comment link at mauicounty.us/agendas. Testifiers wanting to provide oral testimony should join the online meeting via the Microsoft Teams link printed on today's agenda, or call in to the phone number which is also on today's agenda. For individuals wishing to testify via Teams, please raise your hand by clicking on the raise your hand button near the top right of your screen. For those calling in, please follow the prompts via phone. Staff will add names to the testifier list in the order testifiers sign up for or raise their hands. For those on Teams, staff will lower your hand once your name is added. Staff will then call the name you're logged in under or the last 4 digits of your phone number when it is your time to testify. At that time, staff will enable your microphone and video. Please ensure your name on Microsoft Teams appears as the name you prefer to be referred to as, or as anonymous if you wish to testify anonymously. If you are in person, please notify staff that you would like to testify anonymously. Otherwise, please state your name for the record at the beginning of your testimony. Oral testimony is limited to 3 minutes. If you are still testifying beyond that time, I will kindly ask you to complete your testimony. Once you are done testifying, or if you do not wish to testify, you can view the meeting on Akaku Channel 53, Facebook Live, or mauicounty.us/agendas. Before we call on our first testifier, staff, do you mind testing the ringer, and we can have our online members let us know if they can hear it? Sorry, I just sprang that on them.
I see my colleagues shaking their head. That's because there's no music yet.
You heard that one?
I heard that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I kind of sprang that on them, so it took a sec. Okay, at this time, we will call on testifiers wishing to testify on DRIP 5.
Thank you, Chair. The first testifier is the Royal House of Hawaii, to be followed by Christopher Salem.
Royal House, are you ready and available for your opportunity to testify?
They're promoted on our end. They just need to enable their microphone and camera. If not, we can circle back.
Oh, okay. Royal House, do you have your microphone enabled? It's the thing on the top right next to your camera button. Okay, we can circle back.
Okay, then we'll go to Christopher Salem on Teams.
Has he been enabled?
Yep, he's enabled on our end. I see his microphone is on.
Okay, good afternoon, council members. The first item I'll be testifying on is the issue relating to parking, and a very small comment on the airport matter.
Chair,
So
sorry,
support
I
the
apologize.
council's efforts.
I believe at this time we're only taking testimony on Kapalua Airport, DRIP 5.
Oh, my apologies. I think I misspoke at the beginning. We're on the airport item now.
So the procedures are not like they normally are, where you can either go up front or just prior to the item?
Yeah, no, it's at each item.
At each item. Okay, well, I'll just make a small comment related to the airport, which was not what I was meaning to call about today. But some of the information you've just provided, Councilmember Paulton, is valuable and new information. For those of us who went through the Lahaina fires and obviously manned the relocation from the Civic Center up north, and then ultimately all the food aid and supplies at our facilities up here. How this all ties together at the airport. My father was a colonel in the United States Air Force, and it was very perplexing at the time as we looked over to Bellows and other bases that I used to visit with him on Oahu, that there wasn't emergency aid flying in immediately thereafter. And maybe I'm wrong in that, because we were all scrambling to assist people who were really, really in trouble. But how we all were in a place of, which I consider celebration, and we teach this to our children. We can all look at government in that situation there in Lahaina as being at fault, or we can focus on the solutions of being part of the solution, which all of our children were, in being with their close families and friends and being part of the aid all the way down to the aquatic center that we mucked out ourselves because the administration refused to. At the end of the day, it still remains a question as to why there was not relief being flown in mass when you're staring at Oahu, compared to people sitting in line in cars as we went over to get diesel for our neighbors and throughout this community. You know, the tragedy of all of this, and to a certain degree, the PTSD that's within all of us, that I apologize if some of my testimony is not exactly user-friendly, but Junior Nakoa convinced me to start doing this, but it's not something that I feel makes any difference, let alone is something that'll make any changes. I said that twice. So that's my point on the airport. I think that unfortunately there'll be no discovery in this litigation, only $1 billion to attorneys. The whole thing is just depressing. And leads to, well, we just all have to look towards the light instead of the darkness. So I'll wait and talk to the parking at a later time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Members, any questions for the testifiers? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. I do see the Royal House of Hawaii has their hand up, so if you could enable them for their testimony, we're circling back around.
Yep, Chair, they're enabled on our end. They can go ahead and unmute their microphone and camera, and they can begin their testimony.
Aloha, this is the Royal House of Hawaii and an Alorio Land tenant, resident, and holder. Yeah. And I'm testifying on this, and I'm wondering how is this airport able to operate and all of that, or and if any of the descendants of that said lands, those royal patented lands, Olorio titled lands, been contacted, because I don't think they've been contacted, because the original title holders, descendants, are the true owners, yeah, and yeah, I was wondering how it's legal to operate that kind of place over there, I guess. And if the descendants are going to be contacted and be returned the lands, and all the lands from Kamehameha III, Mahele, yeah. And yeah, because the descendants haven't been contacted again, and the descendants say no to any kind of aircraft in the air or anything like that. Because we saw with the boats, the boats was helping everybody over there. So, I mean, we don't need the airplanes, yeah. 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 And mahalo and thank you. That's my testimony.
Thank you. Members, any questions for the testifier? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Are there any other individuals wishing to testify on this item?
Chair, that's all the individuals signed up to testify. If anyone in the audience or on Teams would like to testify, please come up to the mic and begin your testimony, or use the raise your hand function on Teams, and staff will unmute you. I'll provide a brief countdown. 3, 2, 1. Seeing none, Chair, no one has indicated that they wish to testify.
Thank you. Members, I would like to open the floor for a discussion. I propose as many rounds of questions as we need.
Sorry, if there's no objections, could we close public testimony for DRIP 5?
Yes. Any objections on closing public testimony and accepting written testimony into the record? Okay. Closed. Then, yeah, we can start off with 5 minutes if you want. I'll start off with Member Uu Hodgins.
Thank you, Chair. This answer was probably said in the beginning of your explanation of the bill, but there's a lot of words. I understand the solar lighting is an option, but remind me, who is going to pay for the lighting? Us? But then my Corporation Counsel, Mike Hopper, said we shouldn't do that. So where are we at?
We're just, the purpose of the 7B was an update of where we're at. We got up to second reading, but then it was recommitted at the end of last term. So this is just a refresher because we do have new members. And I guess part of it is, can we even move to first and second reading with the unilateral as it's written? Is the main question I had.
Got it. Then I really don't know if I have too many questions then, other than who's going to pay for what, but it doesn't seem like a huge cost. So, okay, thank you.
Next up, I'll go Member Sinensi down this way. So Member Sinensi.
Hello, Chair. In your talk about the history of the Kapalua Airport, when you mentioned that the state had taken over the private Kapalua Airport, is that correct?
Yes.
And so it now falls under the Department of Transportation?
Yes.
And so it is, my question is, so it is, I guess, kind of a legal state airport?
Yes, to answer your question, the state owns and operates 15 airports statewide. We're familiar with 5. Commercial airlines fly into those, the main ones, but we have 10 commuter and general aviation airports as well. Kapalua would be one that was considered a commuter airline.
Okay, and then Kapalua would be considered kind of like a rural airport, a commuter airport like the Hana Airport.
That is exactly correct, and the reason for the state supporting that obviously is for the topics that we're discussing today. Rural areas of our state are in need of air support, whatever that may be. Passengers sometimes, cargo, emergencies has become a big topic of discussion, not just on this island, on the Big Island, as well as areas like in Hana, as you say. So the air ambulance and medical assistance is a big thing for us. And getting people to health care as immediately as possible. So that's the reason why the state continues to operate at a loss, I might say, while the state will generate in excess of $700+ million for the 15 airports. Kapalua by itself will lose about over $2 million a year. But it is something that the state is committed to serve our communities.
Yes, we appreciate that, and I know the Hana Airport doesn't really open planes that do land. The pilots are just checking everybody, so there's nobody at the terminal there. However, after hours, we do have the lighting, but it looks like the pilots can activate the emergency lights from their aircrafts.
That is correct.
As the district representative, I do receive calls, I guess, from neighbors because there has been two separate activities that kind of interfere. One of them, residents have expressed that military exercises do happen at the commuter airport, as well as parachuting. And sometimes the parachuting on certain days of large weather events. We have, in fact, we did have a fatality last year, and we also had several rescues into the ocean where the commuter airport is right next to. So those are some, even though we do, Hana Commuter Airport is the largest for emergencies, rural areas, we are appreciative, but there are some other things that we also attract as a commuter airport. Maybe that is to supplement the operations of the airport. I'm not sure.
The military here in Hawaii is extremely important for national security. The federal government's a good partner. As you know, part of the FAA, the state does receive federal grants. And as a result of receiving federal grants, we are bound to abide by the grant assurances associated with the funding that is provided by the federal government. That funding is what's driving some of our ability to finance or not finance things.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think when you look at Kapalua West Maui Airport, because that airport has the restrictions that was imposed with the county back in the early 80s when Hawaiian built, owned, and operated that airport, the FAA says, you won't qualify for any funding because of the restrictions that's in place. So as Deputy Director mentioned earlier, with 15 airports throughout the state, that's the one that we don't have any federal funds until such time the restrictions is lifted and the airport turns over to state control. So because of that, that's been the challenge for us in Kapalua, is getting any type of federal funding. And for Hana, and I agree with you, we've had issues in the past with skydiving. And again, Hana qualifies for the federal funding. So we went down that road, I think, when Councilman Carroll was in Hana, and a lot of conversations we had, and we tried our best to, for safety reasons, looking at limiting skydiving activity, but FAA, made it clear that we could not, stop recreational activity, although we, the local community, knew that, it was pretty risky out there with the high winds. And we call them pupuli winds because they come from all over. But we did make attempts back then, and not to say that, down the road we can't make another attempt to go back to the FAA and say we as a community, we're concerned about activity, that type of recreational activity. So, yeah, we'd support any help that we could do for that.
Yeah, and maybe 1 or 2 years ago, a state legislator from Oahu proposed to open up Kapalua for helicopter tours, I guess, in the aftermath of the fires, because they had been going in and out. I happened to see that on the legislation list and posted it, and they immediately got hundreds of testimony against it. Also, in my meeting with the West Maui Taxpayers Association, Mr. Rick Nava did concur. He didn't believe that the community would be supportive of military or helicopter or regular night flights. So we're just trying to change the conditions of zoning to simply allow night flights in the case of an emergency. Next up, Member Cook, for your opportunity.
Thanks, Chair. I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay. Member Rollins Fernandez?
Mahalo, Chair. No questions now. I supported it way back whenever we were doing it and almost got it through, and I support it now. Mahalo.
Thank you. Member Johnson?
Thank you, Chair. So I think for me, the only questions I would have is in regards to the night operations for emergency only. And I was trying to look up who pays for our air ambulance. And in my research, now correct me if I'm wrong, it's like we partner with the state and we share the cost for air ambulance. Is that correct? Or maybe you guys can help clarify that?
No, the air ambulance service is private. There are grants that provide for funding, state funding, for specific routes, essential air service type of activity. But yeah, the
Essential air
airports,
service,
yeah,
yeah.
the airports would not fund it.
Okay. Yeah, please.
So that is through the State Department of Health. The county gives a grant to the State Department of Health, who then manages the air ambulance contracts statewide. So we give them a sum of money each year. They then contract it out and oversee the maintenance of that contract.
So this is where I'm kind of just.
One chair.
Yes.
And then there's two. There's the private, and then there's the Department of Health one.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did get a note about going off course with the discussion and me wanting to focus on the unilateral agreement and DOT's requested language, but
I'm only asking, because I'm trying, okay, let me get to where I want to stay on course. If in here it says only operation at night if it's an emergency, and I thought life flights would fall under that, and that's where I was getting into, is that how it works? I mean, what happens if you have an emergency? Can they use the Kapalua Airport and life flight somebody out?
The short answer is yes. The FAA will allow any emergency landing at any airport, regardless if it's open or closed.
As well as takeoff.
Well, they have to leave as well.
Right. So
But they're not to be stationed there.
that's where we get into this rural issue where there is no life flight waiting at Kapalua or waiting at OGG. They're in Oahu and they got to come here to pick up the person and take them back. And you're saying that FAA allows you to do that. You don't need the lights to do that.
You don't need lights to do that.
Is that safe?
That's a determination that the pilots.
The pilots decide.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going down all the questions that I had, and I'm trying to keep it in the narrow scope here on the topic, but that's really where I was going for, is like, for me personally, as a council member who's in charge of a $1.6 billion budget, if there's a way that we can help to have life flights come to Kapalua and safely, and if there's a budget thing that we need to talk about, I'm willing to discuss it to keep our community safe. Once again, women cannot give birth on the island of Lanai because of this one particular hurdle, is there's no life flights for them in case something bad happens. That's something that always goes in my mind when we talk about this type of smaller airports, because we can't really help. And the hurdle is this life flight thing. So it's just something I want to bring up to you guys. I want to stay on topic, but thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
thank you, Member Johnson. Okay. And then Chair Lee?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Member Sugimura?
Thank you. I support this, and I look forward to seeing the day that I guess we have to pay for the lights and help with installation. So I look forward to the day that we, see it in our budget.
Oh, cool.
Thank you.
Great. Member Batangan?
Thank you, Chair, both for this opportunity to ask questions and for holding this in your committee. I appreciate the opportunity to get up to speed on this issue. First question, can I confirm that CD1 is the latest version of the bill? I just want to make sure I'm looking at the latest version.
Yeah, the bill hadn't been changed. What was changed was the unilateral agreement a couple times. And I guess that's where the issue is around, like, would Mr. Hopper sign off on the unilateral agreement as it stands, or would DOT allow the condition of zoning without the requirement that the county pay for and install lighting, and discuss that as step 2? So that's kind of what
Okay.
we're trying to find out, if we can proceed to first reading, or if there needs to be more things, like, does the unilateral need to be changed? Should we do the, like, what is the cart and which is the horse, and which one comes first?
I guess I'll stick to my questions on the bill for now. Under condition 4, we're proposing to add a definition for emergency airstrip operations, but I don't see any mention of who is responsible for declaring an emergency, if anybody. Has that been contemplated already?
I think at the time when we discussed it, it would be like, through an emergency proclamation or through the DOT, they could declare an emergency. It wouldn't be like me or you.
Or an operator?
Oh, Mr. Hopper.
Mr. Hopper.
Yeah, and then I would also add, I think it's not just a declared proclamation necessarily, because it does say any occasion or instance that warrants action to save lives and protect property and public health, and shall include emergencies declared pursuant to a governor's proclamation. So in my mind, there doesn't necessarily have to be a proclamation in a given case for there to be an emergency. I don't know if there's like a pilot in distress or something like that was in mind, perhaps, but I think this would, because if there's a proclamation in place that suspends, if it's, for example, a mayoral proclamation that suspends Title 19 of the zoning, the zoning ordinance, then that would potentially supersede zoning conditions that would be restrictive anyway. But if you don't have such a proclamation, I think this condition could say, in certain cases, you can operate after hours. One example is, it does say include emergencies declared pursuant to the proclamation, but that's not the only instance that there would be an emergency. So I think that's a really good thing to clarify.
Thank you. Okay, I don't think I'm looking at the most recent version, because what I pulled up was the latest ASF that I saw in Granicus, and I was missing the last sentence that Mr. Hopper had read. So mine reads, emergency airship operations are defined as any occasion or incident that warrants action to save lives and protects property and public health, but I don't have any mention of a proclamation of any sort. So I think I'm working off of outdated information here. So just feel free to correct me if my questions are as a result of that. Okay, next question has to do with the proposed condition 17 related to the lighting. Does the bill itself, or I guess the accompanying agreement, need to say who is not responsible for funding these lights? Wouldn't it be enough in the legislation to just say that runway lights at the airport are permitted for emergency airstrips operations only? Like, wouldn't it make most sense to just say what we're enabling, what we're enabling, rather than who's not responsible for paying for it?
I believe that was added in at the request of the State Department of Transportation to get to the unilateral agreement, but then they also wanted to put in the specific wording in the unilateral agreement to say that they weren't going to pay for it. But I'll defer to either the state or our corporation counsel to give you a more legit answer.
In my opinion, it's not necessary, and it's a pretty unusual condition, but I don't think necessarily makes it illegal, because there's no funding obligations created by this condition. So, the county wouldn't necessarily require. The ordinance doesn't require lighting to be installed anyway. It just says if you do install them, they're allowed for emergency purposes anyway. So I don't think it's a necessary condition. I think it came to the point where the state said it's important. So I didn't think that made the agreement illegal. I think the other proposed changes would. But I don't think that that condition makes this illegal, but I do think it's highly unusual and ideally wouldn't be in a zoning condition.
Yeah, it just seems like an odd practice with legislative drafting. I think it reads cleaner without it, but if that's where we need it to be to make this work, then okay, sure. Can you, sorry, Chair, I heard the timer, but I did have a follow-up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Hopper, you said there were other conditions that you thought might be problematic. Can you,
I mean, the changes to the unilateral agreement.
Oh, okay.
Those were, I mean, those were not part of Title 19 or anything to do with the agreement. Something like that would be in a unilateral or in a intergovernmental agreement, separately agendized and discussed, and there would have to be, budgeting involved in that before there'd be a funding obligation. So yeah, I think it was significantly beyond the scope of the unilateral agreement that is authorized by Title 19.
Thank you. And then I guess, if I may, Chair. So this question is for you. So I understand the bill before us. I don't understand how it's tied to the unilateral agreement and why they have to go before council together. Why would one hold up the other in terms of our operations?
Anytime we do a change in zoning or amending conditions in change of zoning, a unilateral agreement has to be signed. And I think in previous councils, we wouldn't get to second reading without a unilateral agreement, but maybe now you can't get to first reading without a unilateral agreement. But I'll let our legislative attorney opine on the specifics.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, whenever there's a bill to either grant a change in zoning or to change an existing condition of zoning, which is what this one is, as the Chair mentioned, a unilateral agreement is required. That's required to be signed in order to have the bill posted for first reading, generally. And then between first and second reading, the unilateral agreement would be recorded with the Bureau of Conveyances before second reading could occur. Typically, the unilateral agreement is a form agreement, and then we attach the conditions that were recommended by committee. In this case, the state DOT has returned a draft revised UA that incorporates within the body of the UA itself over a page of verbiage. That's a new paragraph 5, requiring the county to agree to fund certain improvements at the airport. It is a UA. It's signed by the landowner only, not the county. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So in exchange for the county allowing for use of this airport after 6 or 6:30 or whatever it is, the county is being asked to fund improvements to the property. Am I understanding that correctly?
More or less, yes.
May I ask why? Because that seems odd, right? Like, if the county is granting extended use of a property, why is the burden for the improvements on the county rather than on the landowner?
Mr. Otoguru?
Thanks for that question. It's simple. It's the county, through zoning restrictions, don't allow the state to operate past a certain hour. And for that reason, the county is requesting for access to that for whatever purposes, and that would require lighting. Now, what we did uncover as we initially did our investigation, proper lighting, the full-on digging, cabling, installing was in excess of $8 million, right? The permanent kind of lighting. This solution that has been researched and provided to by Mr. Moniz clearly shows that the purpose that you would like to do and the solution that we put before you now can still serve the same purpose. It's for emergency only when there's an authorization to do so, and that would require us to install battery-powered lighting at the locations for a much lesser expense.
I see, okay. So I think I had misunderstood the response that was given to Member Johnson, because I thought the lights were optional, that they weren't required for operation.
Sure. The FAA, during emergencies, does not require lighting. The FAA would not, because it's restricted, so the airport's closed. Now, in the event of an emergency, a pilot in distress, as an example, will say that and can land. The helicopters have their own lights, but again, as Mr. Muniz said, it's up to the pilot to determine that they can do that. It's no longer the airport.
Okay.
And I'll add to that. So, for example, the West Maui fires, had there been lighting, pilots in conversations would say, no problem, coming in, taking supplies, emergency responders, et cetera. Without lighting, I think the pilots would not agree to it. Majority wouldn't agree to it. You get those that might fly for 20 years, 25 years. They think they got sufficient lighting on the nose wheel of an aircraft that they can do it, take off and land. They'll do it. I've seen it. But I think majority, and even for insurance purposes, would say, hey, we're not putting down an aircraft on an airfield without runway lights. So, but as Deputy Director mentioned, that's at the end of the day, it's the pilot's call or his judgment to land or not.
And there's a difference, right, Councilman, with regard to a fixed-wing aircraft, a plane, a small plane that's carrying cargo, versus a helicopter who can also carry cargo, probably less amounts. So again, you're talking about different vehicles. In the future, what the state is also heavily involved in is looking at electric aircraft, right? Again, another venue for that.
Okay, thank you. So, Chair, to clarify, the county is the one requesting extended use of the airports in emergency operation. This wasn't a request that came from the landowner. As a result of the county making the request, the county is being asked to shoulder the cost of installing lighting that would make it safer for people to operate in the emergency.
Almost correct. The constituents are asking the county, and the county is putting in to change the zoning to allow for the ask of the constituents.
Okay. Thank you. I didn't pick up on that when just reading the text of the bill. Okay.
Mr. Hopper has something else.
I think it's critical, though. This shouldn't be, this zoning change doesn't require anything or request anything. The zoning says you can currently not go past 6:30 p.m., and now the zoning would say you can go past 6:30 p.m. And that you can't, before you couldn't install lighting, now you can install lighting for emergency purposes. So that's what's happened. If there's a separate issue with constituent requests and who's going to pay for that, that's one thing. But this document is a unilateral agreement required by code that has to be recorded before the zoning change, which all that does is allow emergency operations past 6:30 p.m. to go through. If that UA can't be signed, then the ordinance can't be adopted, and then the zoning conditions anyway would not allow for operations past 6:30 p.m. So I think that's where we're at right now. But the conditions themselves do not create an obligation to operate for emergency purposes at all. If this condition changes and the airport says we're not going to operate past 6:30 p.m. anyway, then there's not a violation of the zoning condition.
Thank you, Mr. Hopper. Okay, so for HDOT then, for the unilateral agreement, the department is insisting that we include language saying that you will not pay for any lighting that may be necessary.
That is correct. The installation, the original purchase of the lighting and installation would be borne by the county. We have inserted language that says that while the county, this is the county's request or county's equipment, we are open to negotiating or discussing the ongoing maintenance. Obviously, Marvin and his people at the airport can take care of it. I mean, we're not going to ask the county to do that kind of stuff, right? So they're on an ongoing basis, should this pass, state's more than willing to support the community first and foremost. And it only makes common sense for the airports to then to continue with that maintenance. But again, for further discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Sure. So the way I see it is number 17, condition 17 takes the onus off the state. The way that the state returned the unilateral agreement to us our attorney is not willing to sign off on it. And so if the unilateral agreement continues to hold the language that the county is going to pay for it, it seems like this bill is dead on arrival and it might auto-file. So that's kind of where we're at. That's why it's a status update bill. I did want to just, and this is broadcast on television, and that's the situation. If the state is unwilling to change the unilateral agreement, our attorneys are unwilling to sign off on the unilateral agreement, I guess we've come to the end of the road is all that I know, unless somebody else has a better interpretation of how it is.
Chair, if the county would like the state to reconsider the language used in the unilateral agreement, then based on what we submitted, then please provide those amendments and we will discuss it internally once again.
Okay, I think the one that Mr. Hopper is willing to sign off is the original with the condition number 17 saying the State Department of Transportation is not responsible for providing funding for the installation of runway lights. Once we're able to pass the legislation that allows for it, then we can pursue next steps about how to go about it, is my understanding. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Hopper?
I mean, the unilateral agreement's kind of a boilerplate form agreement. The change of condition 17, I think, was voted on by committee, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, so that's something a committee approved, and I mean, it's an unusual condition, but it's the condition reflected. But unilateral agreements are pretty much the same for all of the landowners, like the agreement itself, and then the recorded conditions are just what the conditions are. So there's not a lot of leeway to change that form agreement. So, I mean, the options are to execute the form agreement that's required by code or not, and then the zoning change doesn't happen. Or, I mean, if there's something else that needs to be discussed, that could happen before the zoning change too. But yeah, there's not a lot of flexibility in the form of the unilateral agreement. It's something required by code to have the conditions run with the land to make sure any future owners have to abide by the conditions, and there's not too much flexibility there under the code. So that's, I think that's where we're at with the UA. I think the one that was sent was pretty much what those are in all of those cases. And if that's, I mean, it seems like the overall issue is I don't know exactly what the issue is, because if the zoning conditions change, they'd be less restrictive than they currently are. So, I mean, if that's objectionable and the landowner doesn't want to sign that, I suppose then they could stay as they are, which is more restrictive. So, but as far as any funding issues, which are entirely separate from a zoning condition, which would allow more than what is allowed on the property now, I suppose that discussion could happen beforehand, but I don't think there's any way to get the conditions imposed without the landowner approving the unilateral agreement so that it runs with the land.
So basically, if the state is willing to sign the first unilateral agreement that was sent, we can move forward. If not, then we're done, kind of.
Okay, Chair, then let that be my to-do.
Okay.
And review it.
Okay, we'll continue to communicate outside, and if we can get to that step, then maybe we can get to first reading again, and we'll keep you guys updated.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. All right. Committee members, if there are no objections, the chair will defer this item.
No objections.
Okay, thank you so much to our resources for being here. Thank you, Mr. Hopper. You guys mind diving right into DRIP 23? Okay. Thanks, guys. DRIP 23, Bill 47, 2026, amending the comprehensive zoning ordinance on off-street parking requirements for housing. Let's see. The committee is in receipt of Bill 47, 2026, entitled "A Bill for an Ordinance Amending the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance on Off-Street Parking Requirements for Housing." Bill 47's purpose is to use the number of bedrooms rather than square footage to determine the minimum number of off-street parking spaces for dwelling units used for housing. Correspondence dated March 5th, 2026, from the committee chair transmitting the Department of Planning's report and recommendations from Lanai, Maui, and Molokai Planning Commissions and related documents. The committee may consider whether to recommend passage of Bill 47, 2026 on first reading with or without revisions. The committee may also consider the filing of Bill 47, 2026 and other related items. Upon gaveling in, Ms. Paranada did upload and distribute amendment summary form that we will be working off of. And I did schedule this item because a lot of members of West Maui, in the aftermath of the fire, they initially were bringing it up nearly every meeting, and now, I've been telling them for over a year I'm trying to work on this. So administrative delays impact constituent safety after the August 2023 wildfires. The main concern is our resident safety, that as fire engines enter a neighborhood that may have a fire, that people will also be able to leave simultaneously. In a lot of our neighborhoods right now, when people park on both sides of the street, it creates kind of a one lane in, one lane out situation. Like in my neighborhood, we kind of drive along on top of the double yellow because there's cars on both sides. Luckily for us, I live in a loop subdivision, but if you live in a dead end subdivision, there has been instances in West Maui post-fire where I think the fire department had to come at a fire from the road above because they couldn't make it into the exact road. This approach is meant to balance procedural requirements with public safety urgency, reflecting constituent concerns. During the agency review of the original proposed bill, the Department of Fire and Public Safety and Office of Recovery supported the bill. Bill 47 incorporates some of the modifications provided by the Department of Planning that the Planning Commissions also recommended. The modifications recommended by Planning that are incorporated in Bill 47 include adding the definition of bedroom. However, the definition only applies to section 19.36B.020 to avoid potential impacts to other provisions of Title 19. Allowing tandem spaces for ADU and kitchenettes, requiring off-street parking for dwelling units with a wet bar. For the full report by Planning and Planning Commission's recommendations, please see Granicus number 2. Bill 47 also contains separate off-street parking requirements for dwelling units in subdivisions with either an HOA prohibiting overnight parking on roads with a minimum of 50-foot right-of-way. But a CD1 version was uploaded to Granicus as number 5 to adjust these requirements based on comments from the Department of Planning, which they may note in their presentation. So at this time, if there's any opening comments from the Department of Planning.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have a real brief presentation really quick just to go over what's occurred on this bill so far. Next slide, please. So you may recall that back in July, as the chair mentioned, that the County Council actually moved Resolution 25-152 to the Planning Commissions for review. Both the Maui and Lanai Planning Commissions heard this back in October, and then the Molokai Planning Commission finally was able to hear it in just this last January. As mentioned, the purpose of the bill is to change the parking requirements from what are currently required based upon the size of the structure to the number of bedrooms within a dwelling unit. Next slide, please. When the department received this bill, it conducted some analysis on it and prepared that analysis in a report that's before you. It's an October 14th report to the planning commissions. And the department looked at this and was really looking at a bigger perspective of some of the reasons why we have parking impacts related to our neighborhoods, some of the existing neighborhoods. And we believe it's kind of a nuanced issue related to a number of factors that deal with mainly how the pattern of development on Maui County has occurred over time, where we have long distances between, or not maybe long distances, but distances between our homes and our jobs and our schools and recreational areas that really causes a need for vehicles, and a variety of other things such as lack of affordable housing. A little over 20% of our housing is doubled up or overcrowded, meaning that we typically have more adults in our housing than we do, which represents that we typically maybe have more vehicles in our housing units that we do. Limited availability of on-street parking, reduced parking requirements from the past. Actually, prior to 1982, dwelling units only required one parking space. So some of our dwelling units probably only have one parking space that's on their property, and so subsequently it leads to more parking impacts within the street. Other things such as insufficient driveway length. Interestingly, our front yard setbacks for residential are only 15 feet, yet a parking stall is really 18 feet. So that leads to cars that sometimes are parked not efficiently on the driveway, extending out over the curb or sidewalk or into the street. We also have things such as, next item was multifamily housing being developed with the single family parking standards. I think the chair alluded to this. We have recently issued, for example, a building permit in Lahaina area for actually a 10-bedroom home with a 2-bedroom accessory dwelling unit. And that by existing code only required 3 parking spaces on site. And so you can see, and if you actually look at the plans for that home, you'll see that it's actually probably going to be used as a more of a 3-bedroom or 3-unit building instead of a single-family dwelling when you look at the ability to use wet bars and so forth. And so you can imagine that something like that's going to have a significant number of vehicles that will be parked on streets and elsewhere. Also, we've noted that tandem parking spaces are not explicitly identified as being allowed for ADUs and kitchenettes, so you'll see some modifications in the code in that. And then sometimes purely a lack of on-street parking regulations and enforcement. Next slide, please. So all of those factors were kind of identified within a report to the Planning Commission, which led to the department's recommendations, and we came up with 6 recommendations. We support the bill, and the recommendations that we recommended were to add a new definition of bedroom. Since we're changing now to bedroom, we need to define what a bedroom is. Decrease the requirement for 4 bedrooms to 2 spaces instead of 3. The bill indicates that a 4-bedroom unit would have 3 spaces, and we recommended it be 2. Which would be more consistent and conforming to what the existing code is right now. Under the existing code, a single-family dwelling unit that is 3,000 square feet or less only requires 2 parking spaces, and you can clearly get 4 bedrooms in a 3,000 square foot dwelling unit, so we thought it would be more consistent. That's why we were recommending 2 spaces. Allowing for tandem parking, as I mentioned, for spaces for required ADUs and kitchenettes, which each require a parking space. So just noting that those can be tandem spaces, I think will be a benefit. Requiring an additional parking space for wet bars in that example that I just mentioned, the new dwelling unit that we saw in Lahaina. You can clearly see in that dwelling unit the wet bar is going to be used, at least we could imagine, for a separate dwelling unit. And so we were recommending that a wet bar, similar to a kitchenette, be required to have an additional space. The 5th requirement was changing the definition of dwelling unit to require rooms to be internally connected. Right now, our code does not require bedrooms to be internally connected within the same dwelling unit, so you can actually walk outside of your dwelling unit to access a bedroom somewhere else. And so what that leads to is, in that same example that I mentioned in Lahaina, we have structures that will have perhaps a kitchen on the bottom floor, an exterior stairway going up to a 2nd floor with bedrooms up there. And so it leads really into kind of subdividing a dwelling unit into multiple units, leading then to more additional cars. And then finally, increasing the front yard setback for garages and carports from 15 feet to 18 feet to allow for more parking on driveways. This is currently within some of our project districts within the code, or actually incorporate this type of a zoning code requirement for setbacks. Next slide, please. So as those were presented to the Planning Commission on Maui Planning Commission back in October, their recommendation was to recommend approval of the department's modifications with exception to modification number 5 regarding the internal access only. The Lanai Planning Commission basically followed the exact same recommendations as the Maui Planning Commission in their meeting in October. And then the Molokai Planning Commission recommended all of the department's modifications, including number 5. And then both the Maui Planning Commission and the Molokai Planning Commission had some other related comments that are noted within the report. Next slide, please. The chair mentioned a couple of things related to an earlier C1 version that was prepared that references a homeowner association and referencing a right-of-way width and reducing the amount of parking spaces for a 4-bedroom and larger if your homeowner association indicated that you were not providing on-site parking in the evening. And if your right-of-way was large enough to support on-street parking, that you could reduce actually the bedroom count. The only concern that the department had was in regards to the homeowner association requirement, as the department does, nor does the county enforce, regulate, or monitor any CC&Rs and homeowner associations. So we didn't want to have that within the actual code. So we were recommending against that. I received the ASF this afternoon, and I believe that incorporates the department's concern with that specific aspect. So the department would be in support of the ASF. That concludes my presentation, and if you have any questions, hopefully I can answer them for you.
And just to add on to his presentation, we didn't accept recommendations 5 and 6 because we didn't have any objection to it, but maybe Ms. Nakata can specify. I think it had to do with we didn't want to impact other areas of the code that we didn't consider. Ms. Nakata, is that about correct reason for number 5? And we didn't have any objection to number 5 and 6, but we thought that it should be a standalone bill because people that think that this bill is about parking when we're changing garage, carport, and internal access, or is that?
Thank you, Chair. I believe
Let's let you
your
hear it from the expert.
I believe your rationale was, as you stated, that it may be more appropriate for a standalone proposal that's adequately noticed so that people who have an interest in an amendment to the definition of dwelling unit, which in this case it was suggested to be placed in the general definitions for Title 19, and we didn't have the means to, I guess, evaluate what unintended consequences might occur beyond this off-street parking bill, or whether people might have been interested in coming to testify on it if it were noticed that way. So the concerns were really on the amendments that arguably were outside the scope of the off-street parking bill. So one was the amendment to the general definition of dwelling unit. And for that reason, Chair opted to place the definition of bedroom not in 1904-040, but within the confines of Chapter 1936B. Same concern for the increased setback for garages or carports, not having a means to evaluate what else it might impact if the change to the length of the driveway were to, increase. Whether people would have had adequate notice of it as part of this off-street parking bill. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, she said it way better than I ever could have. And then I'd like to go to Captain Voss if he has any opening comments.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as you know, we definitely support the off-street parking. But just to make it clear for everyone, the fire department's requirement is just simply for us to have 20 feet wide access, which would allow for a car to go in one direction, the fire truck in the other, and in the places where we do need to operate, a 20-foot clearance gives us the room to operate adequately. So one thing that I've always stumbled on with the county and Public Works was using the term right-of-way. So that does not necessarily mean a drivable surface. It's just the amount of real estate dedicated to the roadway. And what we like to say is either curb to curb or paved area. So the 50-foot thing is not a number for us. It's just you can park as long as you park outside of that 20. And how that gets enforced, also not with us. The other thing I wanted to mention, as far as the driveways go, we were all picturing kind of the Lahaina neighborhoods where we have most of the houses, you know, within 20 feet of the street. So the fire truck would just park on the street and operate from there. But in our flag lots and in the situations where we have longer driveways, the actual requirement is for the fire truck to be able to park within 50 feet of the house. So the designer would need to keep this in mind. If they pepper their entire driveway full of the required parking spots, that gives the fire truck no access. So this shouldn't really impact your bill, but it should be considered, because when the plan comes in the future and we're having people actually draw their cars in their driveway, if we see that on a plan review, we might consider that not accessible by the fire truck. If it should be that we need to actually use the driveway to access. So just a little consideration there for when we push this bill through, that we know what the impacts are. Other than that, we of course support this bill. And I also agree that changing the setback from the house to the street might cause resistance that could possibly slow down the acceptance of the bill of the off-street parking. So it does seem cleaner, but that's outside of my scope. Thank you for the opportunity, Chair, to give comment on this.
Thank you, Captain. Mr. Hopper, did you have any opening comments?
No, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we'll move on to public testimony for DRIP 23. Staff, is there anyone wishing to testify on DRIP 23?
Thank you, Chair. Our first testifier is Christopher Salem, to be followed by Tom Crowley.
Is Mr. Salem been promoted and ready to?
Yes, he's enabled on our end, so he can go ahead and unmute his microphone and camera and begin his testimony.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Salem.
Thank you, council members. I'm definitely going to hold the 3 minutes, as I'm heading into a webinar to try to get financial aid to be able to put my children in college. So another consequence of all of this is poverty, for no other term. Councilmember Paulton, you know, listening to you today, I truly feel maybe we should reach out to Wilmont for some form of a Ho'opono healing between you and I. I truly believe our spirits and our motivation as it relates to serving our communities are aligned. Unfortunately, there's individuals in the room who are now conflicted that I think have caused all this under the umbrella of supposedly protecting the county. But with that said, I'll leave that up to you, but I truly believe we should focus on the things we can do good together, because obviously my resume could be very valuable in this process. As it relates to parking on Hui Road F, same thing would apply. We have attorneys concerned with liability about taking those roads over under the county's wings, no pun intended, to the recent airport issues. But the matter is that they're putting lives at risk while they're focused on things that don't exist and solutions that we easily could bring into play on parking on that street and others. Again, I believe that I could show you those solutions graphically, but then again, it seems like I'm boxed out of my own community as far as assistance goes. So in terms of this today on the parking goes, you know, this definition that's being brought up about what constitutes a bedroom. That's already by reference. This is not, I mean, thank you for the clarification, but a bedroom is, I'll point out, the Maui County Building Code adopts nationally recognized model codes developed in the ICC, International Code of Council. It used to be the UBC. Again, I've built 450 residential units in my career. I've built, I wouldn't say miles of roads, but I'd say pretty close. So I understand the standards. I understand how all this comes into play. And I also would reach out the same thing to Councilmember Cook. Hearing you yesterday, I also feel that you and I could, especially through William Snipes, find some sort of alliance in all of this and drop the nonsense. So the bottom line is a bedroom's already adopted in those areas. Now we're going to further clarify it because of some form of manipulation by our good friend Greg Brown. But how the county building department and plan checkers and planning department will turn a blind eye towards media rooms and all that other nonsense, and I'll wrap it up. The bottom line is thank you for what you're doing, but I'll let the council know that the planning director has been given formal notice of 10 days to make a determination on the Brown development based on the new evidence, and that will give us the rights to escalate that either to appeal or to celebration, where she's getting the planning department's getting a second bite of the apple to do what's right by the citizens. And I think Councilmember Paulton, if you'd assist me in that area, I think they throw a parade for you, to be honest with you. In my community, I know that's true. So that's my read of the current matter relating to parking. So thank you. I need to go to matters at hand to see if I can get my daughter in college. Thank you so much.
Thank you, members. Any questions for the testifier? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Staff, can you call the next testifier?
Chair, the next testifier is Tom Crowley on Teams.
Aloha Committee, Tom Crowley, testifying on my own behalf here. My experience with this parking issue is from about helping more than 100 people with their bed and breakfast and short-term rental permits. And oftentimes I have to say the parking that you have on your property is not compliant with the code and so forth. So I've evaluated hundreds of homes in this regard and helped scores of people try to create the proper parking that they would need. I have 5 comments and suggestions on the proposed requirements. Number 1, accessory dwellings that have more than 1 bedroom should have more than 1 parking space. That's pretty simple. If you have a 2-bedroom accessory dwelling, it needs 2 parking spaces. So leaving something in there that allows them to get away with 1, and with the increase in size that we've recently made to accessory dwellings that can be up to 1,000 square feet, you can have a 3-bedroom accessory dwelling. You can't have 1 parking space. So the accessory dwelling should be evaluated under the same criteria that you're proposing for the primary homes. Second, I agree with the original version of the plan that called for 3 parking spaces for a 4 or 5 bedroom home, not leaving a 4-bedroom home at just 2 spaces. Again, I've been to enough places and I've seen when you have 4 bedrooms, you have 3 cars at least. So that should be in there. And then 1 additional parking space for every bedroom over 5 makes a lot more sense than the current code that uses square footage. The requirement for additional parking spaces for a wet bar or kitchenette is actually now unnecessary. If we're going to require a parking space for every one of those bedrooms, the concern about the wet bars was that we're turning a bedroom into a studio, ergo another dwelling in here. Well, if we're already covering that here with the parking spaces that are required per bedroom, I don't see that being necessary. Maybe it's necessary in a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom house where we're currently only requiring 2 parking spaces, and maybe they would add a wet bar and then split it off. But it's redundant and we don't really need it. And I really don't like that the idea that we're accepting that they're going to use the house in a way that's outside of code to when we give them a wet bar. If it's a wet bar, it's a wet bar. And I've seen a lot of wet bars that are exactly that. They're just used as wet bars. They're not kitchens. So we shouldn't be kind of penalizing someone who puts a wet bar in their living room. The comments that were made about the setback and the interior connections, I agree that those things should be discussed outside of this bill. I happen to think if you were discussing the setback increase, it should be to the entrance to the garage or carport, because I've seen many garages where you enter from the side, so you don't need that. You wouldn't have that extra driveway space in the front. One other thing that I would suggest whenever you do this is that you bring in an experienced plan checker to tell the council, this is how I would administer what the change you're going to make is. Because there's probably things we haven't thought of that the plan checkers see all the time. And the head of the department, they don't know that. They don't check plans all the time. So I really suggest that when you make these kinds of changes to code, that you request someone who actually looks at these and approves them to tell you how they would change what they do based on this code. I think you'd learn a lot more. Thank you for the opportunity, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. You're singing my language. My clarifying question is, did you hit all the 5 points that you wanted to?
My number 4 and number 5 were the setback and the interior connection. So, yeah.
Oh, okay, got it. Members, any further questions, clarifying questions for Mr. Crowley? Seeing none, thank you so much for your input. I found it very valuable.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to testify?
Chair, the next testifier is Greg Rilski on Teams.
Has Mr. Rilski been allowed? Okay, so we're ready for your testimony.
There I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we sure can.
Is my audio? Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. My name is Greg. I am a resident of Lahaina. I am a tenant of FEMA, and I am a guest of the Occupied Kingdom of Hawaii, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify today on parking. In my community, Puamana, we have more homes than we have parking. And I know it's a different community, and I know there's a different section for private streets, but I'm just wondering if, some of the things that I have gathered during the rebuild process is clearly people are saying, well, no, this is not a bedroom, but you can totally sleep people in it. And so when I see things about, how are we classifying where people stay and how they stay, I just get a little worried because, people are always going to break the rules on this. And I don't know how you do compliance, but we already have people who clearly have dens or offices and all of these other things that are going to be bedrooms. This is just how they kind of got around that because of the Minatoya, you can't add a bedroom to have a TVR. And so they're like, oh, no, it's not, today it's not a bedroom, and we won't tell you when it is one. And, we do also give people 2 parking spaces. Well, you get 1 parking space, then you can park there, but you're on your own, right? So at one point, that gate that was illegal for like 25 years got an after-the-fact building permit, and as part of the conditions of the building permit, they had to reluctantly provide access to the shoreline, which is where we are. So then that took away spaces. So even if you say, oh, well, you're required 2 spaces, in our community, we don't even have that. Right? And we already know that we have people building way more. We have 1 bedrooms that have turned into 5 bedrooms. We have all these additional bathrooms. So parking is a big deal. Now in Kilohana, I get to walk through the Waikuli neighborhood. I don't even know what to think. There are so many monster houses going up, and those streets are already littered with vehicles. Even in Kilohana, we have people parking on the sidewalk. They wait till after dark when there's no more enforcement, but vehicles are, I honestly never thought there'd be so many vehicles on Maui. I've seen so many abandoned ones, and now it makes sense that they're abandoned because people get another 1 or 2 to replace those. So looking at this, at the parking situation, it is a quality of life. It's something that that the residents will have to face every single day. If it's a vacation rental, it's a little annoying, but you know what? Maybe they just Uber. Maybe they do other things because they don't have to live here. They're only staying here for a few days. But to live here, have adequate parking, really focus in on like what is a bedroom. What about people that stay in the living room? The living room, technically is part of the common area that wasn't originally considered, but in our particular complex, we have had no shortage of 12 people staying in a 2-bedroom because you have the bedrooms, you have the living room, and they with multiple cars. And then they're shocked when they're told they can only have 2 cars. They have more. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roski, for your testimony. Members, any clarifying questions for the testifier? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else ready, wanting to testify?
Chair, that's all the individuals signed up, so I'll provide a last call for oral testimony. If anyone would like to testify, please come up to the podium or raise your hand on Teams if you would like to testify. The count is 3, 2, 1. Seeing none, Chair, no one has indicated they wish to testify.
Thank you so much. At this time, I'd like to close public testimony and accept any written testimony into the record. Any objection, members?
No objections.
I did want to go straight into if the planning department could address the testifier Crowley's comment about the kitchenette and wet bar, if those would still be necessary.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think Mr. Crowley does make a good case since we are changing this to bedrooms as opposed to what it was in square footage, that he does make a good case that if we're just counting parking spaces per bedrooms, that whether or not I agree mostly with the wet bar. I'm still not sure about the kitchenette because kitchenette still implies more adults on the property than a wet bar. Our concern was wet bars are turning into kitchenettes. They're being used in the example that I mentioned as actually really kind of cording off another unit, but not calling it a kitchenette, but a wet bar instead. So it is leading to more adults, but I do see Mr. Crowley's point that we're now counting towards bedrooms. So.
Okay, and then any comment about his other testimony that ADUs with more than 1 bedroom should have more than 1 space, similar to, I guess, the main dwelling?
I would tend to agree with that.
Okay, great. Mr. Hopper, was that sufficient discussion after the testimony to take a recess, or do we need more discussion than that?
Hey, Chair, I would check with OCS on this. We don't have a standing requirement for levels of discussion before taking a recess.
Okay. Ms. Nakata, do you think that was sufficient discussion, or should we have more discussion before a recess?
Yes, Chair.
That was sufficient?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Members, any objection to taking about, come back at 3:30, which would be an 18-minute recess? No objection? We all for it? Okay, so let's take an 18-minute recess and come back at 3:30 because you guys have done such stellar work up to this point. Recess.
go.
Will the DRIP committee return to order? The time is 3:31. Thank you for your promptness. I took the first opportunity on questions. Charlie had to leave, and it looks like maybe Member Uu Hodgins as well. Or maybe Member Uu Hodgins and Member Cook are coming back. I'm not too sure. But let's start on this side this time with any discussions or questions. I did want to fill folks in during the recess. We did speak with the administrative planner as well as our analyst and attorney about how we could incorporate Mr. Crowley's recommendations in. So we are ready to do that if the members would like to. But discussions, suggestions, whatever you want, we'll go a couple rounds, maybe 3 minutes, starting with Member Batangan.
Thank you, Chair. I first want to thank you for giving the purpose and intent for this bill. The context was really helpful for me in understanding where you're coming from with this. I also want to thank the administration for their very thorough presentation. We don't always get that. Sometimes departments will come and say, I'm just here to answer questions, and it doesn't help me understand what they're thinking, what their concerns may be. But hearing the history of this bill, especially the work that the planning department put in, was really helpful. Because I came into this with some concerns, and I guess I'm sharing my thinking. I hope I'm not coming across as critical, but when I first read this, I had concerns because generally I'm against parking minimums as they increase the cost of housing and available land that's could be used for more housing or other public purposes. I also worried that this would primarily impact people who are trying to abide by the law, whereas a lot of the on-street parking issues are caused by people who are breaking the law when it comes to development on their houses. So there is that. But as we went through the presentation, I was better able to, articulate my thoughts on why I was initially uncomfortable with this. And that's because I see the issue with on-street parking as one, an enforcement issue, and two, a result of the lack of affordable housing on the island. People are cramming into smaller and smaller spaces because they need to. And when I thought about the impacts of this bill, we're making housing more expensive, therefore more people have to cram into the available inventory, therefore we're compounding the problem of on-street parking. So I wasn't sure on what this bill was aiming to achieve, or if we were attacking the problem in a way that might be fruitful. And I think I got some of the answers I was looking for. I will say I still do have some reservations because of that loop that I had just described. But I guess just focusing on the text itself, can I ask the administration if they had, one of the things I was confused about when I first read through this was going from a fixed floor area, which is, standard across any dwelling, to number of rooms, which varies. Was there any consideration in the various planning department conversations or planning commission hearings on what that would mean? Because I grew up sleeping on a tatami mat in our living room. That was one size. I had cousins who had an actual bedroom. That was a different size. And if we're going by bedrooms rather than something fixed, was there any, I worry that we're not going to have clear guidance for aligning parking stall needs with our building code.
That's a good question. Thank you. I think when we were looking at this issue, and I know it was mentioned by Mr. Crowley to speak to some of the plans examiner staff. And incidentally, that's one of my other jobs. I'm actually the supervisor of the plans examiners. And so we did talk about this amongst the planning department, and we actually went through this a lot. And that's why this bill has a lot of analysis. If you look at the department's recommendation to the Planning Commission, touches on a lot of things of why we see these parking problems. And I think one thing that came out of it was including a definition of bedroom. If we're going to go down this path of allowing this to be counted by bedrooms, it's important to have a definition for bedroom and to define what that is and what is not. Because what we assumed and what we talked about was that a bedroom equates to potentially people that are adults that are sleeping there and residing there. And you're exactly right. There are other rooms that you could use for sleeping quarters but you have to kind of draw a line. And we kind of use this then as an example against that. For example, that 10-bedroom home that we issued a permit for in Lahaina, which under the proposed ordinance or the bill that was proposed would have required 9 parking spaces, 10 with the ADU instead of the 3 that the current code provides, which I think is more equitable on what that size of a structure and number of bedrooms and the way it appeared when you look at the plans, and that it's actually really a 40-unit building on there, and you know that you're going to have a significant number of adults there. So I think that is a better way to capture the number of vehicles that I think are really going to be tied to that particular instance. At the same time, we were concerned about creating too many nonconformities as well, right? Is we're changing from a square footage to a number of bedroom count. And what does that do to existing homes that have maybe a 4-bedroom house and or a 3-bedroom house and a den and things like that? So we were concerned about that too, but I think the provisions on the bedroom count and where it's really going to affect is going to affect the larger homes, the very significantly larger homes that I think are really kind of addressing the context of what the chair mentioned. And I think this really gets to that point. I mean, the other ones, I think we have a little bit of nonconformity. There's a section changed to the nonconformity section that says if you are nonconforming and you add a bedroom, you'll have to add 1 parking space. You don't have to bring the whole thing into conformity, just to add an additional parking space for that bedroom. You could add onto your living room, onto your kitchen, or add a bathroom would be fine, so that wouldn't affect. So I'm not sure if I'm addressing your question, but there was a lot of thought.
Help me think about like the implications in going from square footage to bedrooms. And thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Sure, and if I could add on to it, we did also speak with Aaron Wade, who had similar concerns, and that's when we really honed in and said this is about health and safety and the access of the fire department, and that's why specifically, like, if the road is wide enough where people can park on both sides of the road and not affect that 20-foot road width that the fire department wants, we were like, well, let's loosen it there. And then we tried for HOAs, but you heard the situation with that. But then we also discussed, the potential for parking modification waiver from the director in those cases, because most HOAs I know are pretty strict on enforcement, whereas like the fire captain said, they need it, but they're not the enforcers. And our police department has been chronically short-staffed, and I'm not sure that we collectively want them to be focusing on parking enforcement or, violent crimes and whatnot. So just to add on to where we're coming from.
Thank you, Chair.
I do see Member Hodgins. I did want to give you your opportunity when it's best for you, so we can do it now or we can do it later, whichever one works for you.
Thank you, Chair. Now is okay. I am in my vehicle with my daughter. She has an appointment in 5 minutes, so after this, the service may be a little shoddy. But I really don't have too many questions. I do understand why we're doing this. And I know we all have to find our balance, and there's going to be a little bit of push and pull in what always works best or perfect or good, and that's what we strive for. I do appreciate the planning department's work on this bill to do so as well. I do appreciate the recommendations in changes, and for you as well, Chair, I saw your CD1, so I'm supportive. I have no questions right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Member Sugimura, I just seen her and I knew she had a hair appointment, so I just wanted to get a flavor of her feelings. Member Sugimura?
Yeah, no problem. I think it's pretty amazing when you have parents who are juggling family.
I'm not sure if you have multiple devices on or.
Oh, you know what?
Can you try talk now? Shucks, we can't hear anything. Can't hear. Did you re-sign in and have two apps open? Oh. I'm not sure if it's your computer in the chambers. Oh, she'll come back. Okay. Member Johnson.
Okay, so thank you. And I think this bill went through all the planning departments and have the planning departments here. It's talking on it, hearing from, the mayor's office, Ms. Wade, the fire department. I think that's how legislation should be made. And I don't have any questions until we get to the amendments. So I'm here for the amendments. Nice work.
Okay, thank you. Member Rollins Fernandez.
Same. Mahalo, Chair.
Oh, cool. Member Cook.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for all the work on this. This really strikes, anyway, I just told you earlier, I mean, my road is side street parking the whole way down. My truck is one of them. If I park my truck in their driveway and up against the garage door, when that is available, I block the sidewalk. I'm supportive of it for health and safety. Captain Voss and the fire department need us to do everything we can to enable them to do their job. So when they speak about what they need, I have a hard time speaking against it. I do want to point out a couple of things that I disagree. The new definition of what a bedroom is has been a problem with the Department of Health for a long period of time, because if you have a cesspool and you're going to put in a septic system, then they count bedrooms. 5 bedrooms is a 1,500-gallon system. And so if you have a 3-bedroom house and you want to build an ohana that has 2, you can use the same system. And if you have, with a new definition, if you have a 3-bedroom house, a den, and a library, and that's considered by the planning department as 5 bedrooms, then you would have to put in a separate system for that. Now, granted, we're talking about areas that are sewered right now. So I'm just bringing to the people's attention areas that don't have sewer, that have a cesspool that needs to be converted, or they have a cesspool and they're not going to have sewer. This issue with how the planning department defines a bedroom is problematic in that regard.
Member Cook, just to clarify, I believe those types of potential unintended impacts or consequences was the reason that we applied the definition only to section 19.36B.020. So my understanding, by doing that, it wouldn't trigger a Department of Health. But if Ms. Nakata or Mr. Post could clarify if that's correct interpretation, if you'd like.
They've been calling it like that for a long time. I'm saying the Department of Health has made oftentimes their own determination. And now the planning department is underlining to some degree, because they would say if it was, if it looked like it could be a bedroom, sometimes they would call it a bedroom. And there's a lot of different interpretations. It's not, there's going to be situations where what I'm saying is inaccurate, and the situations where what I'm saying has been problematic with people with cesspools. I'm supportive of it, but
Ms. Nakata,
No, go ahead,
clarifying if this is
Please.
only applicable to the parking portion of the ordinance?
Thank you, Chair. At your direction, we inserted the definition of bedroom into a subsection F under section 1936B020, which starts off with, for this section's purposes, bedroom means. And so this definition is intended to apply narrowly. Thank you.
Primarily for parking purposes, not for cesspool or what. I mean, we don't control the Department of Health and how they do it, but
No, okay, what I said in the beginning of that was that we could, a potential collateral impact of it, part of my resistance to it. I'll support the bill, but I just want to say this. We're not solving the problem of housing. We're not solving the problem of why we have such density in areas that weren't necessarily designed for it. So our job as a council is to come up with legislation to approve projects, to get more stuff built. So I'll just leave it at that. I have a hard time restricting when we're not enabling. We all want to enable, but it's really hard to get a subdivision approved or a project approved to add to the housing. So that's my time. Thank you, Chair.
thank you. Member Sinensi?
Thank you, Chair. I just had one question about the setback from 50 to 80, I believe. Just what was the reasoning? Mr. Post can explain.
Sure, go ahead. But to clarify, we didn't incorporate that. We didn't have a objection to it, but we just thought it would be kind of deceptive because this was a parking bill and now we're changing other things. But go ahead if you want Mr. Post to explain it.
Sure. The idea behind it is that our front yard setbacks for residential, including the garage, is only 15 feet, yet a parking space is 18 feet. So that means that really on a typical subdivision for a driveway, you're going to see a car parked on a driveway will be hanging out over the sidewalk, over the curb, or into the street. So the idea was to move the front setback for a garage or a carport to be 18 feet, so you have a driveway length that could park a vehicle on the property. And I noted that some of our project districts actually do that. Actually, some project districts have a 20-foot setback requirement for their garage and then a 15 or a 10-foot setback for the rest of the house. So it's basically pushing the garage back on the property so you have sufficient room to park on the property.
Like tandem, you mean, right?
Definitely guilty of that here at my rental. I'm sticking out into the. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, we weren't opposed to it. We just thought it should be a standalone bill so that people would know what is going on. This is essentially a parking bill, and if we're changing other parts of the code that people couldn't reasonably infer are being changed from a simple parking bill, or maybe not simple, but we felt that it's not as straightforward for folks to understand what they're either testifying or not testifying to. So we're not opposed to it, but it should be properly agendized and noticed so people that have strong opinions on the matter could testify and weigh in on.
Yeah, I'm finding that in the urban centers like Kahului, space is really getting limited. Versus coming from the country, get a little bit more space. But here in the urban centers, yeah, I definitely see that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, does anyone have need for a second round of questioning, or should we move on to go ahead, Member Batangan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm coming around on this bill, but I still have some discomfort. And part of that is because I still, well, I guess I'm concerned about the increased costs to housing and that feedback loop that I had described earlier. But I also am hearing, based on from the department, that a big part of this is a lack of parking enforcement. And so I'm curious to hear whether or not there was any consideration on increased enforcement of our existing laws before we change anything on the books.
So as I can respond to that. As I mentioned, right after the fire, when we had the weekly community meetings, and now then there was a weekly and a webinar, or twice a month webinar and weekly, and then now it's once a month. Parking was one of the biggest issues, especially as people started to see these 10, 12, 16 bedroom units coming up, which are, we figure that will be multifamily houses on a single family, whatever. There were times when people would ask about enforcement of parking, and I'm just stating facts. At that time, the response from the administration was the potential for Park Maui to be the enforcement in areas where the roads were substandard widths, like Mill Camp or, whatever have you. And then at one point, the administration said, oh, if there's a red flag warning, then maybe we can do better enforcement, because of the fire happening during a red flag warning. And then the last time it was brought up, I think this bill was kind of pointed to as a solution, and the Park Maui solution was nowhere to be found. As you know, our branch and the mayor's branch do not tell the police what to do. It's the police commission, and as long as I can remember, they've been short 1/4. So I mean, it's difficult to say that. I know Member Sinensi at one time was backing like a citizen parking enforcement thing, but in the context of Hana Highway. And I don't know if you'd like him to speak more towards that, if you recall, or no? Yes?
I guess.
Was that not your question?
No, that was my question. Sorry, I would just heard you say something and then had another train of thought and kind of lost where I was speaking as I was speaking. But I brought up the question because when I was with the department and was working on Park Maui, we had worked with the state to allow for the police chief to deputize police enforcement officers through the Park Maui program. But we could conceivably expand that. There's, the legislation passed. We have the agreement in place with the police department and the director of transportation to be able to enter into agreement so that they could contract out police enforcement or parking enforcement, not done through a police officer, but through another program. And I would feel more comfortable taking a step like that prior to doing something like this, since part of what I'm hearing is that people are illegally parking on the streets, and I don't want to punish people who are legally trying to build a house for illegal behavior. And if we can achieve the same goal by taking a less invasive step, I think that would be my preference as a, but.
If I may respond to that, I was a renter for many years in Lahaina, and so I had a landlord live on site, and my unit didn't have off-street parking. And, sometimes I would get off my second job waiting tables at 10 o'clock at night, and I'd be circling the neighborhood looking for parking, and I'm like, it's 10 o'clock at night. I don't think anybody's going to be coming out and moving their car. So after maybe 2 weeks of doing that, I'm like, there's not going to be parking open up at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And early on in my career here, we had a parking enforcement where they wanted to make one side of the street illegal to park on, which, you know, majority of Maui County, it's illegal for overnight parking. I think, to me, enforcement doesn't solve the problem because, like, even in Lahaina, 80% were renters. Going back, maybe more than 80% are renters. So this is not the landlord's problem. This is the community's problem. And making it illegal or enforcing illegal parking doesn't help the community. Like, where are they going to park? You know, like, are they going to have to park at Safeway overnight and then walk up Lahaina Luna Road, which Safeway doesn't want you to park in their parking lot overnight? The reality of the situation is many of the houses being built in West Maui right now has kind of let the horse out of the barn, and now we're trying to close the door after the fact. But there are many, many, many members in Wahikuli, Lahaina Luna, who are traumatized and afraid that, like, this 16-bedroom home, which might be a 4 multifamily illegal thing, is going to have 8 cars per each illegal dwelling, and ticketing those people for parking overnight on the street isn't going to solve anything because they still live there, they still work there, they still need a way to get to work, and simply ticketing them isn't going to solve anything. It's just going to increase their cost of living. They might end up going to jail on a bench warrant, and then less productive members of society, and all through because the landlord didn't provide off-street parking. So I mean, enforcement can be a solution, but for who? Not the renters whose landlord didn't provide any off-street parking for a 16-bedroom house that they want to rent each bedroom out to a couple, which each has a car, you know? So, I mean, there's that side of the issue. Like, if we enforce our community who's trying to get to work, trying to, like, do essential work, then where will they park? There's no place in Lahaina. There's no place where I was renting. I had to park like maybe 3 streets down and walk home at 11 at night, and that was still probably illegal. Oh, Member Cook, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Well, thank you for that description, because basically you're talking about new dwellings in the reconstruction area and holding the builders accountable. That helps clarify it to me. I just want to share, as far as enforcement, and this is sort of a little bit sticking up for MPD. I've lived in the rental that we've been in Kihei for, like, this is the 6th year. And when I first moved, and I'd never lived someplace with side street parking. Fortunately, it was either country and we had land, or there was enough parking stalls in Wailuku where I lived, or in other places. But so I made a comment to one of the neighbors. I said, well, everybody's parking on the side of the road, and that's illegal. And they basically told me, hey, don't say nothing. If you report somebody and the police come, they have to ticket everybody, because you can't have pick and choose and selective. And he goes, somebody did that before and they regretted it. And when I say literally, you look on my road, it's like 3 blocks long, and there are cars choke on the side almost all the way down. Not totally, there's a little bit of room. So I want to, for Maui Police, besides them being understaffed, the situation that we have is really unmanageable, and it's like puts them in a hard spot. And one of my building inspector friends years ago said, if they enforced all of the rules, we'd have twice as much homelessness. And so, you know, turning a little bit of an eyes for when these rentals and stuff. I just sharing that. I mean, we all want more homes for our people and the fire department, but I hope you don't mind me sharing some of the pragmatic, real world issues that we don't want to make these rules and laws that are hurt the people that we're trying to help. Thank you.
Any further questions before we move on? Okay.
Call my chair. I see somebody on screen.
You see what?
Hi. Oh, can you hear me?
Oh, Member Sugimura, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm listening to this, and part of what I've seen down in, like, Member Senensi calls it the urban area, but like in Kahului area, you have these really big monster homes coming up, and there's a house that was basically looked like a little home on a corner right across the commercial area, and that house now has this monster home. I just wonder where all the cars are going to be parking, but I wonder if the planning department can say something about those kind of situations. And I don't know if it's enforcement, but I'm sure with planning your approvals, you must have, thought about that.
Mr. Post?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's interesting. Our code doesn't allow, and probably should not allow us a lot of subjectivity in reviewing plans for new houses and large houses. So we have our certain standards, right? Our development standards of setbacks and building height, and you can build to that. Provided that you build to that, we'll issue a building permit. And so you're right, there are very large homes, and especially the very large ones, and I think this is what this bill actually addresses, is it gets to the very large ones by now actually requiring what should be the amount and number of parking spaces for such a large home, so you can park on property as opposed to taking up all this the off-street parking. I mean the on-street parking. So I think this is one way to address that, because those very large homes, if they cannot provide the amount of parking spaces, they're going to have to reduce the size of their homes, right? And actually reduce, and you'll actually kind of handle it from a different angle, really, more or less. That's the only way we can do it. Otherwise, we don't have any, and nor do I think we should have any discretionary review of every single residential, and looking at that. It throws a whole nother wrench into things, and I've worked in organizations that do that, and I wouldn't recommend going that way. So try to control it through your development standards, and I think now these parking regulations will help control those sizes of those homes too.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the members? Okay. The chair will entertain a motion to recommend passage of Bill 47, 2026 on first reading. Member Sugimura? Is that a motion?
So moved.
And
Yes.
then Member Johnson, a second. Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to replace Bill 47 with the proposed CD1 version distributed at today's meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Member Hodgins, seconded by Member Cook. Okay. The proposed CD1 version amends the bill's preamble to conform with the revised exceptions to the off-street parking requirements for housing. In proposed subsection E, deletes the exceptions under the use column for housing. 3, inserts an exception for the minimum number of parking spaces column for dwelling units with 4 or more bedrooms when the width of roadways fronting the dwelling unit allow 2 lanes of traffic flow and parking on each side of the roadway. Deletes proposed section F in its entirety and adjusts subsequent lettering accordingly. These revisions were suggested by the Department of Planning after having expressed concerns about determining which subdivisions have HOAs with CC&Rs prohibiting overnight on-street parking and the enforcement of those CC&Rs. The department also suggested replacing the 50-foot width with a description of the roadway's function instead. And then if there is the appetite, I also, based on Mr. Crowley's testimony, would entertain an amendment on page 4 of the replacement to delete the section referring to with a wet bar because it's kind of already covered. And to also delete the section referring to accessory dwellings on page 4 and add accessory dwelling to the end of the housing description right after single-family dwelling on page 3. Those were two of the recommendations for from Mr. Crowley in his testimony, because the wet bar part is redundant, and we checked with Mr. Post on that, and he's okay with it. And Mr. Post also was okay with the accessory dwelling unit being moved to page 3, and Mr. Hopper also said he was okay with it. So if there is the appetite from the body, yes.
Sorry, Chair, more of a point of order.
Sure.
Since we're operating under Rosenberg, I'm a little confused as to what the rules of operation are
I
with
believe
operating too deep.
committees are still Robert's rules.
Oh, okay, that makes it even, I gotta remember 2. Okay, so I guess I was just confused.
Rosenberg, Chair.
I was just
all
confused as to
Rosenberg?
what the practice is supposed to be if we're operating at 2 amendments in. I was gonna ask if you could take up the first motion first, the First Amendment first, and then we take up the additional round of amendments, just so that I'd be clear on what the order of everything should be.
Okay, you want to vote on the replacement first?
Yes, please, just because I'm having trouble finding my notes in Rosenberg on how to go too deep.
Any objection to voting on the replacement first?
Can we hear for
Chair,
Corporation
Member
Councilor?
Batangan's going to have to take it up with Mr. Rosenberg in California.
No objection.
Ms. Nakata, are you okay with that?
Chair, I think it's up to the body, but staff would recommend that before you vote on the replacement, that perhaps you could take up each of those amendments to the CD1 version individually and vote on those individually, then vote on the replacement as amended.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can I just ask that you start the voting on the other side of the aisle?
Sure. Member Rollins Fernandez?
Mahalo, Chair. Okay. So Rosenberg, Roberts, I prefer Roberts just because it's cleaner. My understanding, and this is why it annoys me, is that there just doesn't seem to be that consistency because we're so accustomed to Roberts that Rosenberg kind of like threw us off this term, because my understanding is under Rosenberg, we can do what Member Batangan is asking us to do, which is to vote on the substitute and then vote on the amendments after. I mean, it's whatever we decide, basically. There's no like wrong way, because Rosenberg said that we can do it however we want to do it. That makes sense to us.
Okay.
That's what he said.
So we could do the replacement first and then amend that. Rosenberg's cool with it.
Chair, I think it's up to the body. It just seems a little more linear to take up the individual amendments to the CD1. But if the body would prefer to vote on the CD1 first and then make amendments to the CD1, that's fine.
Okay, only Mr. Batangan had a preference. Does anyone else have a preference? No? Okay. So let's vote on the CD1.
Rollins Fernandez was trying to get your attention.
Oh, Mahalo, Chair. I was just going to say, since Member Batangan is the only one that has a preference, that I'm supportive of going that way.
Okay.
Mahalo, Chair.
All right, so we're just going to vote on this ASF that was distributed right now. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Chair, 8 ayes, 0 noes, 1 excuse. Chair Lee, motion passes.
Okay. I can do the 2 amendments one at a time if you'd prefer. Sure. Okay. I will entertain a motion to amend the CD1 version by striking the cell with dwelling units with a wet bar, as it's a little bit redundant.
So moved.
Moved by Member Johnson, seconded by Member Cook. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Chair, 8 ayes, 0 noes, 1 excused. Chair Lee, motion passes.
Thank you, and I'll entertain a motion to, on page 4, strike the cell with accessory dwelling units
So
and
moved.
move that to page 3 after single-family dwelling. Moved by Member Johnson, seconded by Member Cook. All those in favor?
Excuse me, Chair.
Oh,
Just to clarify, so it wouldn't be moving the cell to follow single-family dwelling under housing?
yeah, it would
You
be
would-
striking the cell and just moving the words accessory dwelling
Thank you, Chair.
to after single-family dwelling. Everybody clear? Moved by Member Johnson, seconded by Member Cook. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Chair, once again, 8 ayes, 0 noes, 1 excused. Chair Lee, motion passes. So I believe you're back to the main motion as amended.
We're back to the main motion as amended. Any discussion before we take this historic step?
Yes, Chair.
Member Batangan.
Thank you. I gotta say, I'm much more comfortable with this after our discussion. But I think that there are still some outstanding concerns for me. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate the work that you put in and the work that the departments put in to this. And that, yeah, I'm not voting yes now, but that doesn't mean that, as I dig into this a little bit more or have more discussion with the departments, that I won't be persuadable. Thank you, Chair.
Any further discussion from the members? Okay, based on what was said, I guess we're calling for a roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Proceeding with roll call vote. Councilmember Sugimura.
Aye.
Councilmember Sinensi.
Aye.
Councilmember Rollins Fernandez.
Aye.
Council Chair Lee.
Excuse.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Cook.
Aye with reservations.
Councilmember Batangan.
No.
Committee Vice Chair Uhajins.
Aye.
Committee Chair Paulton.
Aye.
Chair, you have 7 ayes, 1 no, 1 excused. Chair Lee, motion passes.
Thank you, members. This concludes today's.
Chair,
yeah.
did you want to go back to the main motion as amended?
Oh, I thought that was the main motion as amended.
Yes.
Chair, I apologize. My understanding was that was the main motion as amended.
Oh, apologies, Chair. I thought that was a vote on the CD1 as amended.
Oh, I think we did that one first because Rosenberg said can, and then we amended it 2 times.
Got
and
it.
then
Thank
we
you,
went
Chair.
back to the main motion. That Rosenberg, huh? He's a tricky guy. Okay, then this really concludes today's Disaster Recovery International Affairs and Planning Committee meeting. Thank you very much, everyone. The time is now 4:15. 15 minutes on me as a gift to all of you. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
So generous, Chair. Mahalo.